This week in post, I take a checkpoint to see how much my processing style has changed in the last 6 months. Hey everyone, I'm Scott Davenport. Welcome to In Post. Thanks for joining me today. But earlier this week, I showed you some otherwise unaired footage from an outing I made early in 2018, and I have reprocessed one of the photos from that outing after having maybe refined my black and white style. And so I thought we'd take a look at those two photos here. And as it turns out, the changes are reasonably subtle. And I think some of that has to do with the subject matter. If you didn't check out the In the Field episode, take a look at that one and you can see, get a better appreciation for how my eye has changed since I started this black and white project until now. So here are the photos. I've got two of them here. They're down in the lower corner here. And the one we're looking at, this is what I processed when I first did the shoot. And so really was just, doing your basic, black and white work, nothing particularly fancy, going with a very high key look. And I'm just going to move over an arrow over to the next one. And we're going to see some differences. So it's a little darker. The shadows are darker. This middle area it's both more defined and yet a little more creamy at the same time. So let's look at both of them. Here's the first one. And here's the second one. And I'm liking the second one more. I think really the main shift is increasing the contrast, really making the shadows really deep, making the brights really bright. Matter of fact, let me see if I can sit these two next to each other in a particular view. So here you can see the differences a little bit better. This one on the left was my original processing, and this one on the right is my updated processing. So the shadow areas are still very deep, but they're not as muddy. This is very, there's a lot of detail that's lost in here. Recovered that a lot more. And the center part here is more defined and yet smoother. This was kind of a bit of more of a wash of gray. And here I've brought out more highlights, left like those ridges you see this is a sand line, a ridge in the sand going through here as the water is swooping around it. So let's take a look at, really what were the couple of fundamental changes. And it came down to the area of, I think, the tone curve a little bit, but in particular, the way I applied a gradient adjustment. So let's get back in the develop module. Let's look at the differences of the basic panel between the first and second photos. There's a couple of things that you'll notice are obvious. Number one is the profile. This is the old camera profile that came with Lightroom CC before they did this whole camera profile update. So even my baseline's a little bit of a different start. But in particular, it's this shadows slider. That's relatively low. I didn't open the shadows up very much. If I go to the second one, we'll see the profile is now the Adobe monochrome, the new standard for black and white. But that shadow slider is opened up much farther. That's revealing all this detail in here. Keeping on with this rock, then I did some local adjustments. Did those with radial filters. And I've got two of them here. This top one is covering most of this rock and even some in the background there to let that hover over, just to increase the contrast and clarity, make that rock jump out a little bit. The second one was to make sure I was really keeping the very deep shadows deep. So notice another range mask here, and this is as tight as I can get it. This is actually a limitation I don't like in Lightroom. I can't get this to be any smaller than that range. I'd actually like to get a little tighter on it. And the smoothness is really low already. I can't get this just into these crevices. I'd have to go paint it in with a brush. And I just got tired of working on the photo for now. I said, all right, I'm gonna consider this good enough. But that's how I'm getting these really deep shadows in here, yet keeping the rock open overall. Now I also mentioned the difference in the sand and this creaminess. Again, let's go back to the first photo. Let me close down these radial filters. We don't need to keep that open. And notice this center area. It's smooth. It's kind of grayish. Not as much punch to it. And then here, there's more tone. These rocks are deeper. The shadows are deeper there. There's another localized gradient or radial, just like here. But this center part, I am using a graduated adjustment. This goes across the entire photo. And if I hover over that, we'll see a nice range mask. brushed away from a few of those rocks there. And what am I doing? Reducing clarity. That's what's giving it that soft feel. You take clarity in the negative direction and it makes things soft and a bit diffused. It's almost like adding a blur filter from other tools. We don't have a blur in Lightroom, but we can go negative on the clarity. So adding all those things up, that's how I ended up with the difference between the two. Let's take one more look at the difference. So the one on the left, this is from January of 2018, and then the one on the right is from June of 2018. And I certainly like the improvement. It's shown that I've gotten a little more refined in my post-processing, my black and whites. And that's good. I'm comparing my work against my own, and in this case, not just compositions and style of photos. We saw some of that earlier this week in the field, but also in the post-processing. As you just keep practicing, you start to get better. So I think that's the tip of the week. I think it's a good exercise, is comparing yourself against yourself. That's really the best measure to check how you're growing in your photography. Are things improving? And improving can be anything. There's no one standard by which to measure that. It is going to be a personal thing. It will depend on what you're trying to improve upon. And also, keeping in mind, I've done this many times, and I'm thinking about 5, 6, 7 years ago. The improvements were very dramatic because I had a lot to learn. As you get farther and farther into your photography, the little changes are small. They're just that. They're little. It's like you learn this one new technique, or this you've refined your eye in just this one other way. And so there are these little tiny slices that are slowly being added on top of your stack of improvements, which hopefully it keeps growing, but it will slow down as far as that rapid growth. So don't get discouraged, especially if you've been doing photography for a while. You probably know this already, right? Those little improvements, but each little improvement will ultimately add up to a great thing. And that will do it for this week's In Post. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did, let me know somehow. +1s, likes, social shares, always appreciated. If you got questions about photography, leave them in the comments below. Or if you want to keep it private, you can send me a message through my website, and I usually turn an answer around in a day or two. You don't have to wait around for me to do another video to get a response. And hopefully my response will help you out. I can promise you that. Your questions definitely make me a better photographer. They check my assumptions, they make me think about my photography, and we can both get better together. That's kind of the whole point of this. Well, until next time, my name's Scott Davenport, and happy shooting.